for joining us today. I'm here with Dr. Jimmie Valentine, an alum of the University of Mississippi School of Pharmacy, and we're going to learn a little bit about his career path and how he has worked in pharmacy today. Dr. Valentine, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born, where you grew up, what high school and college you attended?
Yes, I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, and grew up there and went to high school in Shreveport. I attended Fair Park High School in Shreveport. And after I graduated from high school, I just went across town actually to Centenary College and was a student there for 4 years. Then I did a brief stint at LSU in Baton Rouge and graduate school there. And I did not like the program I was in, so I came back and finished up I did another degree actually at Centenary College, got a bachelor's degree in chemistry then, and then came from there to Ole Miss, where I spent 4 years in graduate school at Ole Miss and graduated from there in 1968.
Wonderful. What would you say attracted you to Ole Miss?
Well, I was when I was a student at Centenary, one of the faculty members from the School of Pharmacy, Dr. Joseph Sam, came through the college where I was attending, and I met him, and he told me a little bit about the medicinal chemistry program at Ole Miss. And I had already at that time thought I was going to Vanderbilt to do graduate work in biochemistry, and he told me about the medicinal chemistry program and invited me to come to Oxford and visit. And so my wife and I packed up our car and headed up to Oxford to take a look at the campus. And we got to meet the graduate students while we were there, and some of the undergraduate students as well at the time. And so we just felt like that was the place where we should be. So that's where we decided to come there to go to graduate school.
That's wonderful. Your interview is a little bit unique in that you have a PhD in pharmacy. Can you tell us, did you have relatives who were in the field of pharmacy, or what was kind of your influence to go into pharmacy, or excuse me, to get your PhD in medicinal chemistry?
Yes, I didn't have any relatives at all that were in pharmacy. I knew growing up there was a pharmacist that was a good friend of our family. I never considered going into pharmacy myself because I was interested in biology and chemistry, and didn't really think about a pharmacy career, quite frankly. And so then when I was about to graduate with my degree in chemistry, and I had a biological background as well too, then it really appealed to me to study medicinal chemistry to kind of be an extension of the undergraduate training that I had already undertaken. I had always been interested in drugs and medicine anyway, and so it was a kind of a nice way for me to get into the area.
Absolutely. With that, can you tell us a little bit about your time in the graduate program at Ole Miss? Maybe a favorite memory, a favorite hangout during your 4 years there?
Well, of course, you got to remember that when I came to Oxford in 1964, it was pretty much a nothingness town. Okay, we had 2 movie theaters that opened sporadically at night sometimes, and the fun thing that everybody would go down to the movie theater and you'd count the number of rats that ran across the stage.
Oh my goodness.
And that was kind of everybody counted, and you try to compare notes to see how many rats you saw run across the stage. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
So but the people, we just fell in love with the people in Oxford. Okay, the residents are there, and being graduate students, we were there when the student body went home. You know, the undergraduate students went home. We were still there in town, and we got to know some of the people in the town, and we just fell in love with the people in the town, and just really developed a kind of a kinship with them. And excuse me, when you're in graduate school, you have a kind of commonality with people. There were at the time I think there were 12 or 14 of us in medicinal chemistry program, and so we all kind of bonded together, and we would get together. We were all poor students, and so we would get together on a Saturday evening, and a lot of times when Ole Miss football team was out of town, we'd get together to watch the game on television. and we would barbecue together. We'd have hamburgers, and maybe somebody would bring a case of beer or something like that too. And so we'd kind of relax and enjoy ourselves during that period of time. Um, Oxford, as I said, when I came to Oxford, it was a still a very colloquial place, I guess. There was not. We had Nelson's department store down on the square, but there weren't any of the shopping malls out there, that you've got now out along Highway 6 or um, in the stores. There was only really one grocery store in the town. It was called Big Star. And so, there wasn't a lot to do. We would have to hop in the car and go to Memphis if we wanted to go to a movie or something. We would do that sometimes on a weekend, or maybe go out to eat dinner or something like that. We'd go to Memphis. But the friendships that we developed in graduate school, we are still friends with those people even today. Unfortunately, some of them have passed away, but the ones that are still living, we're good friends with them. And in fact, 2 years ago, we had a reunion. Let's see, is it 3 years ago? I guess we actually had a reunion at Ole Miss and came there and met with the current day graduate students there and the faculty and so forth, and just had a lovely time. We had a 3-day reunion there, had a great time together.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. So, great time in the graduate program, it sounds like. Straight after graduation, can you tell us a little bit about the kinds of jobs you started to get and work, I guess, kind of your work in the field?
Sure. When I graduated from Ole Miss in 1968, I graduated in August of 1968. I stayed on a couple more months to do some postdoctoral work with Dr. Sam. He and I were writing up some publications at the time. And then I moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and accepted a position at Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals in St. Louis, Missouri. And so I was on the staff there as a senior research scientist for 5 years in St. Louis. And I was developing drugs. When I got to Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, they had recently purchased what was called Neisler Pharmaceuticals. It was a branch of Union Carbide and Dow Chemical. And they were located over in Decatur, Illinois. And they had about 6 compounds that they had done preliminary animal testing on, and then also some preliminary testing in humans. Very little, most of it had been animal testing. And so I was assigned the task of evaluating those 9 compounds and trying to decide which ones would be the most logical ones to try to bring to market and to go into clinical trials in humans with them. And so I selected 3 different compounds out of those 9 to test. One of them was an anti-inflammatory agent, and the other was an antihypertensive agent. Now you got to remember, this was in the days before we have all the good hypertension drugs, antihypertension drugs we got today, like the angiotensin blocker drugs and the beta blockers and so forth, which are all widely used today for hypertension. But in those days, we didn't really have very many good drugs for hypertension. The thing that was used kind of commonly was a drug called Wyrufria alkaloids, and it had a bad side effect because it sometimes caused people to commit suicide. So it was it was not an ideal drug, but it was about all that we had available in those days. And so we started developing 2 drugs for antihypertension, and one of them went into the market and was used. It was called Veratrum alkaloids. It was from a natural plant. It was actually from roots of a plant. And so we put that in the market. And so it served in the marketplace for maybe the next 8 years or 9 years, something like that, as one of the drugs that was used for hypertension. Then, as I said, some better drugs started coming along after that time. Then another drug that I helped develop while I was there was a formulation of methadone. Methadone is a drug that is used it's a synthetic analgesic drug, and is used to treat individuals when they have severe pain. But one of the uses also is to treat narcotic addiction, and it's used in what's called methadone treatment programs around the United States. And so I worked in conjunction with the people that were in the the pharmacy division of Mallinckrodt at the time, where they developed the formulation, and then actually I did the clinical trials in it in the patients at the St. Louis Psychiatric Hospital that were unfortunately addicted to heroin at the time. And so we took that formulation, which was an oral formulation, and studied in them. And then I did the what's called the bioavailability or bioequivalence studies with that drug to show that it was comparable. It gave us the same amount of methadone that you would get if you gave an intravenous dose of methadone. In other words, it was equivalent to that. So I kind of helped spearhead those drugs and develop those. And that drug is called methadose, and it's still on the market today. And so that's one of the drugs that I helped develop there. And then about that time, I got a friend contacted me about a position at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Pharmacy and School of Medicine in Kansas City, Missouri. And so I went over and interviewed for that position at that institution, and they hired me as an assistant professor of pharmaceutical chemistry and a lecturer in medicine. So I had joint appointments in both the School of Medicine as well as the School of Pharmacy. And actually, my laboratory and offices were actually in the medical school which was down in the Truman Medical Center in downtown Kansas City. And I was on the faculty there for a total of 5 years. I opened actually the very first laboratory in the Midwest that where we did therapeutic drug monitoring. So we we would take patients, we would take blood samples from patients and then analyze the drugs that were in their blood and get an idea of how to dose them correctly. And so I worked very closely we had a cadre of PharmDs at the time, and the PharmD degree was just brand new at the time. And these people all had graduated either from Kentucky or California. That were the only two schools that were often PharmD at that time. And so I worked very closely with them, and we did the studies. We developed therapeutic tests for phenobarbital and dilantin, or diphenhydramine, which, or phenytoin is the more modern name of it, which we were using as anticonvulsants in patients. And so we would do the drug levels in our lab, and then we would monitor, alter the dosing of those individuals. Before that time, the only way to dose somebody is you just kept giving them a dose, and you followed what we call lateral gaze nystagmus. You see whether or not they got jerky eye movement. You know, if you got a dose too high, they would get that. And so we would then back off on the dosing of that. And then at that, so that, along with my faculty duties, one day I had the lady who was, her name was Dr. Bonnie Peterson. She was actually the medical examiner for the Jackson County, Missouri medical examiner's office. And one day she just showed up in the medical examiner's office. It was in the medical school, in that Truman Medical School complex. It wasn't too far from where I was. And one day she just showed up in my office, and she said, she said, I've got all of these bodies laying over there in the morgue. And she said, I know that they've died of heroin overdose, but I don't have any way to prove it, because I don't, you know, I don't have a way to show that what their levels were in the blood. And she asked me, said, can you do that? I said, well, I don't see any reason why we can't, because I've got all the equipment here. I've got all the instrumentation and stuff to do it with. So we set up a program with her then to start doing an analysis of blood, bile, urine, brains, any tissue from postmortem cases. And so basically I ended up setting up the very first forensic laboratory in the Midwest.
Incredible.
And so we set that laboratory up, and it functioned, you know, for the 5 years that I was there. And then I accepted a position at the there was a new medical school that was being opened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was called the Oral Roberts University School of Medicine. And one of my colleagues there at the University of Missouri knew the new dean there, and he at the Oral Roberts University School of Medicine. He recommended to that dean he contact me, and so he did. And make a long story short, then we moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was an associate professor of pharmacology there in the new School of Medicine at the Oral Roberts University School of Medicine. And as it turned out, I spent 12 years on the faculty there. After 6 years, I was promoted to full professor of pharmacology, and I was teaching. So I was teaching sophomore medical students medical pharmacology, and then teaching clinical pharmacology to the fourth year students. And in addition, we operated, I set up a laboratory there to again do forensic toxicology work, and we did also therapeutic drug monitoring, just like we had done in the laboratory in Kansas City. So then after 6 years, after I'd been promoted to full professor, the person that was the chairman of the Department of Pharmacology there left the institution, and then they had a search committee, and the search committee recommended that they promote me to chairman of the department. And so then I served as chairman of the pharmacology department at Oral Roberts University for 6 years. And then in 1990, that school closed. And whenever it closed, my wife and I were both on the faculty there. My wife is Dr. Jimmie Valentine, and she's a biochemist. She got her undergraduate degree at the University of Oregon in chemistry, and then she got her PhD at MIT in biochemistry. And so she was on the faculty as an associate professor of microbiology there at the Oral Roberts University School of Medicine when she and I got married. And then we then accepted positions at the University of Arkansas College of Medicine in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I was professor of pediatrics and pharmacology, and was associated, actually had my office at the Arkansas Children's Hospital, which is the teaching hospital for pediatrics and adolescent medicine for the University of Arkansas. And I spent then the next 19 years of my career on the faculty there at the University of Arkansas, and retired from there in 2008. And then we came back to Mississippi. We moved back to Gulfport, Mississippi. And we've been residents down here now for about 10 years, a little over 10 years now. And once I came back here, I started getting calls from attorneys across the United States who had heard about some of the research that I had done and so forth. And they asked me to start testifying in some of these cases that they had where drugs were involved. And so, to make a long story short, I've now got a toxicology, pharmacology toxicology consulting practice that I actually do consulting nationwide across the United States. And I really am more busy now than I was actually when I was a faculty member, running around the United States.
Happens.
Yeah, running around the United States doing all the work that I do, and but it's been a lot of fun. I've been able to use my education that way, and continue to eat my education. I thought when I retired I was going to read books by the pool, but that didn't happen. So I'm reading the computer now and doing consulting work.
Absolutely. You've had an incredible career, it sounds like. What would you say has been your favorite part of it? What have you enjoyed the most?
Well, I've enjoyed I enjoyed the teaching. Okay, I've always been just drawn to teaching, and when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, obviously I wasn't able to do much in the way of teaching, and I always wanted to get back to teaching. So when the opportunity arose, that's when I decided to go back to teaching again. So the students always kept me motivated, and I taught when I was at the University of Missouri. I taught undergraduate pharmacy students as well as medical students, and so that was a very interesting time in my life. And then when I went to the University of Arkansas, particularly, they had pharmacy school there, and I did some lecturing in the pharmacy school at the University of Arkansas as well. And then we had 4 PharmDs that were in our section of pediatric clinical pharmacology, and so I interacted regularly with them. We also had what we had called a toxicology journal club as well too, and we met on a monthly basis with the people in the poison control center there in the pharmacy school at the University of Arkansas, and we consulted with him frequently too on any poisoning cases that may have arisen across the state. So I think that was my favorite thing, is just interacting with the students and teaching, and then of course I enjoyed all the faculty work I did too. The last 5 years I was at the University of Arkansas, I was the chairman of the Institutional Review Board, which oversaw all of the human research that was being done on the campus there at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences in Little Rock, as well as the Veterans Administration Hospital. We had 2 of them there in Little Rock. One was the McClellan VA, which was adjacent to the med center there, and the other was at the North Little Rock VA hospital. And then we also had a VA hospital up in Fayetteville, Arkansas too. And so I oversaw all the research in all of those hospitals and teaching institutions in that 5 years. And so I had a lot of input into drugs that were being developed in clinical patients again, and that was a really rewarding period of time as well too. In fact, a lot of the drugs that are being used today in clinical medicine, I had a role in helping oversee the clinical trials in those in those institutions.
That is awesome. Sounds like you definitely have a wealth of knowledge to share with current pharmacists and also future pharmacists. With that, do you have any advice for incoming freshmen or students who are about to begin the professional program?
Well, looking back on it, I wish that I had gone in and gotten an undergraduate pharmacy degree. Certainly I got very good training with the education that I got in biology and chemistry, but as I got into a pharmacy school and saw the undergraduate education that was given as a pharmacy student, I thought this is really a perfect background for someone. If you if you there are other things other than just retail pharmacy, and that's all I knew about, quite frankly, when I was coming along. As we talked about earlier, I didn't have a pharmacist in my family. I didn't really understand about it. But I think that it's a great undergraduate degree, and actually it's a professional degree now because you get the PharmD degree now. I think that it's an excellent background for you. If you decide to go the retail route, that's fine. We need good retail pharmacists. A lot of people decide to go into clinical pharmacy, where they in a hospital setting where they're making for example, intravenous infusions and that sort of thing would be going to be used in patients working in a hospital setting, and that's an environment where again they can make a very valuable role. Then with the PharmD degree now, you could go ahead and take a rotation. It would be another year, do a clinical clerkship, and then get get a specialization. For example, you could become a specialization in family practice, or you could go into nephrology or cardiology. I had a lot of PharmD people that worked with me that were specialized in various programs like that. And then another role that a pharmacist can do is to go into industry like I did. At first I went into the pharmaceutical industry, and that certainly is a valuable place. There's a lot of pharmacists in industry. For example, when I was at Mallinckrodt, there were at least 4 pharmacists under, at that time it was just a bachelor of pharmacy degree, but they were working in the what we call the pharmacy section there, and they were helping formulate drugs for going into the marketplace and fulfilling a very valuable role in that. And then the other thing you can do with undergraduate degree in pharmacy, or PharmD in it, is to go ahead like I did and get a graduate degree in some field of pharmacy. You could do like pharmacy administration, or pharmacology, or pharmacognosy, or medicinal chemistry, or those are all fields, that they're open to people to do. Um, Kind of what I did after I got my degree at Ole Miss in medicinal chemistry. I didn't actually, after I practiced medicinal chemistry for a short period of time at Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, but once I went into academia, I got more into the pharmacology end of it. And I forgot to mention earlier that actually I went ahead and got board certified in pharmacology too. I got board certified in clinical pharmacology because I felt like teaching the medical students like I was doing, I needed that background. So I became board certified in clinical pharmacology as well. So there's this, it's a, it's kind of a pharmacy degree. It's kind of a springboard to go in a lot of different routes. You can kind of choose what you have an interest in. And when you're in pharmacy school, you get exposed to pharmacology, you get exposed to pharmacy administration, you get exposed to pharmacology, you get exposed to pharmacognosy, and all of those different areas, which are very valuable areas that you could go ahead and pursue and do graduate studies later in it.
Wonderful. And I think we have time for one last question, and that would be, I know the COVID-19 has impacted us all, and I'm sure it has had an impact on your life as well. Would you like to speak a little bit to how it's affected your work schedule and maybe your home life as well?
Sure. Well, the home life has actually been pretty good because my wife and I have been sequestered together, and we
Right.
we have a wonderful marriage, so that's worked out good.
Absolutely.
Um, and we have our son and daughter-in-law and three granddaughters that live here in Gulfport, Mississippi as well too. And so um, they've been sequestered, so we can get together with them, okay? So
Nice.
we do see them occasionally, so that's been good. Um, my practice in doing consulting has not suffered one iota during this because I've been able to do things like we're doing today through Zoom and telephone, and so I've been writing reports like gangbusters, I guess, during this period of time. And
Absolutely.
I have in fact, like this week, I think I've had this is maybe like the fourth Zoom conference I've done already this week. So
My
I'm
goodness.
doing I do at least a Zoom conference a day, maybe some days two or three in a given day, talking to clients across the United States. So from that standpoint, it has affected me. Now, what it did affect is that I have to go and testify in trials across the United States. And so all the courts have gotten shut down across the United States. And so I've not been able to go and do that testimony. And so now it's got kind of a backlog in this sort of thing. The courts are starting to open up again. We've had a few courts open up here in Mississippi, and in the past, this month alone, I've testified 3 times in trials here in Mississippi. And but in those trials, it's been good because the courts um, they've worked it out so that we're the only ones in the courtroom. The attorney, the usually it's a prosecutor and the judge, and it's a bailiff maybe, and a court clerk, and then the defendant in the case, and then of course I'm in there as a expert witness. And so there's not very many of us in the courtroom. We all wear masks, and so it's worked out all right. Um, so starting here in July, I've got some trials actually are scheduled now. I've got to do a trial out in Bellingham, Washington, the second week of July. And then the week after that, I'm doing a trial in Bakersfield, California. So I'll be skidding here and there. And
Yes.
that's going to be interesting because I've not flown on commercial airliners, since all the COVID things started out. So that's going to be a little bit of an experience too. But as I understand now, they are having everybody wear masks on the planes and so forth. So hopefully it won't be a problem. But I'm about to find out about that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I guess in short, that's the only thing that's really affected me, I guess, in that way. Um, we have our little granddaughters, of course, had to go do homeschooling, so my wife and I both work with them. My wife more than me have worked with them, to help them do some homeschooling too. So that's kind of, I think that's what all parents and grandparents have had to do during this time as well too. So we're probably no different than anybody else in that regard. Um, so that's kind of the way the thing is now. Actually, next week, my wife and I are going to Knoxville, Tennessee, and that'll be the first time we've actually left home. We're fortunate because we have our own airplane.
Oh,
And so we are actually flying our own plane up there to Knoxville, so we won't have to sit next to anybody on an airline or anything like that.
yeah.
And she and I are speaking to a group of attorneys in Tennessee. It's the Tennessee DUI Association. These are the attorneys that defend driving under the influence cases and driving under the influence of drug cases. And so we're going to be speaking to them, and we'll be speaking on. I'll be kind of covering the difference between drugs and alcohol in the body and how they affect it. And then my wife is going to be covering um, how drugs affect driving performance. And so we'll be doing that seminar up there next week in Knoxville, Tennessee. So that'll be the first time. She and I have uh, done those uh, kind of seminars all over the United States. We probably do 2 or 3 of those a year. We get invited to do those to these various attorney groups across the United States. And so we if if this had been a normal year under COVID, we probably would have already done a couple more of those seminars. We did one in February, and that was right before they stopped all the travel or it was made everybody sequester. We
Right.
did one in Florida right before all this is turned about. So that's again something's kind of affected us. We would have been doing more traveling for just doing presentations across the United States as well.
For sure. Well, I definitely appreciate you making time to tell us about your fascinating career. I know that I've truly enjoyed learning more about it, and I know that our prospective students will as well. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good to be with you today, Nicole.